Massive welcome to everyone. How are you all doing? Thank you so much for joining us today. Um, just to let you know, this is recorded and we are going to be sharing it publicly, although our intention is to only have the speaker views on. We will aim to finish within 60 to 90 minutes and we're going to have some shares at the end. And what we'll also do is if there's anyone that wants to, we'll get to a point at the end where we do turn the recording off. So if any of you do want to share a bit more privately, then we can allow that space. But obviously, please feel free to be engaged in the chat. If you've got questions that you want to put in the chat, please do, and we will try and capture them and address them when it seems best as we go through. So, is everybody? Oh yeah, obviously the normal housekeeping. Have some water, pen and paper, and most of all, your presents. So try and find a place where you can be comfortable, where you won't be disturbed. And yeah, so right, yes. So like everyone, you will have tried to set goals in the past that you have not followed through on. And now this is not your fault. This is because of the way we have been taught how to set goals that goes against our human programming, and B, how the industry doesn't really understand the programming we got. And those are the things we're going to cover in this workshop. So this workshop will actually help uncover that main secret that's going to change how you will set goals and succeed going forwards.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to this workshop on the missing secret to setting and achieving goals. In case this is the first time you've been on one of our calls, we are Ishi and Sebastian, and we are both authors with a book coming out in this summer of 2026, speakers, coaches, and are both master trainers for Peter Sage. Between us, we have 30 years combined working in personal development and probably at least 50 years on our personal development journeys, with like the reading, the courses, all of that sort of stuff. And as co-founders of Transcendent Shift, we help people dissolve the invisible barriers to change and transformation. You're on mute.
Sorry. Like much of this work, this workshop focuses on the messaging or gaps in the way that the standard coaching and personal development industry works. We're going to have we're going to look at a deep understanding of how the real subconscious psychology works and how to work with that rather than follow the standard rhetoric, which can typically be counterproductive and work against us. So, in this specific case, we're going to be looking at why the standard approach to goal setting doesn't work, and then how we can do that effectively. So by the end of this workshop, or you'll have a clear understanding, and towards the end of this workshop, we're going to run an exercise that you can also take away with you and use for yourself, and we encourage you to do so. And as part of that, we're going to use alpha tapping, which is a tool that some of you will be familiar with. Now, alpha tapping is a tool that we've pioneered and we use with great impact in Taptivate and our other courses and our client work. And today we want to share one powerful way that alpha tapping can be used when it comes to setting goals and setting ourselves up to achieve them. Now, if you want to know more about us and our work, we will share a link to our website when we upload this. And there's lots of information on there. We'll also be sharing a Facebook page you can join at a later stage.
So let's talk a little bit about, goals in general. So normally it's tradition at this time of year in the new year as a time to reflect over the previous year and set goals for the year ahead. Although it's not the only time we can set goals during the year, it's quite a common time to do it. And as you probably noticed, you have social media now sort of flooded with motivational posts and, the adverts on the TV on how to change and, how to do things differently. If you're a gym member, you probably noticed that the gyms are now full of new members and they're now full, whereas they were probably quite empty in the last month. People start diets, sort of health kicks, health journeys, and people are starting sort of with their with new goals and specific goals. There is a sense of hope and enthusiasm in the air, but slightly tainted by how long will it work for? Will it actually work? So, you have all these people going for things, but in the background, those doubts are there if we really sort of look deeply into it. It is natural to feel like making a change because it is the new year, kind of you think new year, want to do something differently. And, having just been through a festive period, a lot of us have indulged and, maybe gone away from our routine. So we feel like something, just needs to change. We may have justified the excesses that we went through in the past few weeks, but it's okay. I'll start a new diet, I'll start a new health kick, I'll start something new in the new year. And, some of your health values or some of the things you might be disciplined in, some of your routines may have just sort of gone. So it is completely normal to feel like a new year, start some new goals. And this is one of the reasons we wanted to do this workshop, in the new year. But in many ways, it's not actually the best time to do it right now, because when we are sort of at the end of, beginning of the year, we are looking back at the previous year and we're looking at what did we miss? What goals did we not achieve? What rather than what you have achieved, and this could lead to some negative chains of thought, some self-judgment on ourselves, and we can end up being in a place where we set goals from a place of what we don't want rather than what we do want. We're sort of coming into it with a slight negative air, and it can feel quite forced and pressured when we're not in tune with ourselves. And we may find that over this past few weeks as well that we're not as in tune with ourselves because we've been busy, we've been sort of particularly, a lot of women as well, sort of very focused on family and doing things and getting things ready for sort of the Christmas period and so on. So we end up tuning into goals of desperation and not aligned and the away from perspective, like I mentioned. There's something else which I heard of recently as well, which made a lot of sense to me as well. For those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, this is our winter, and winter classically is a time for hibernation, time for reflection, time for integration. It's not often the time to start something new. That happens, mainly in the springtime. So we're sort of fighting against that sort of natural, I don't know, sort of yearly rhythm, if you like. So I guess one of the things we're saying is as well is that although we're doing this workshop on goal setting sort of right now, it doesn't matter when you set goals. What we're sort of sharing in today's workshop can be used whenever you decide to, set a goal and sort of want to move forward. An example of a goal that is very common at this time of year is weight loss. Particularly when we've sort of indulged a lot. And this, going back to what I was saying before about, setting a goal from the away from perspective rather than towards from, many of us get to the point where we're, do we want to lose weight, for example, because we feel uncomfortable and because we've eaten too much, which is it away from, rather than do we want to feel fit and healthy and, in our most sort of optimal sense, body-wise. Psychologically, there's a big difference between the two. And that's something that's quite important when you're setting goals, is it towards or is it away from? And we will cover more of this later.
Yes, so whether it's a resolution about diet or a goal about, say, a business achievement, I guarantee we've all had times when we've set goals only for them to last a couple of months or maybe even just a few weeks. And this is because of the way we're naturally programmed and the way that we've been taught to set goals. So we're not set up to win, right? So for you, this is about to change. Today, we will cover a secret to setting goals. And as I said before, once you know this, you'll see setting and achieving goals in a completely different way. So first of all, let's get some interaction. Can you put a yes in the chat if you've ever set a goal for it to then be quietly abandoned, even if that was a goal that you were like massively excited about? So yeah, lots of yeses coming in. Also, maybe put in the chat, why do you think your goals fail?
Mm.
Bit more of a thinker. too big, lack of clarity and commitment, not committed. They become hard work, exactly, yeah. Succumb to limiting beliefs, lack of consistency. Too high importance, distraction, yeah. Purpose not big enough. So those are all fantastic answers, and they'll kind of link in quite well to what we're going to cover. So the key message really here is that most people think they fail because they lack discipline or they see themselves as a bit lazy, as in they don't have the motivation and the momentum to keep things moving. And the thing is that when we believe that and then we try to set a goal and we fail, it validates that, it reaffirms that, so we believe it in more. So we can actually get to the point where we actually don't like setting goals because we can't trust ourselves to keep them. And we then want to avoid that feeling of failing them. Yeah. The truth is, it's not your fault. Before we go into the secret, what we want to cover really are what are the best goals to set, right? So it's important to set goals from the right place, and it's worth taking time and effort to focus on the goal you want to set. So really, the first one is the goal something that's truly aligned to our values, our heart, what we desire? Or is it something that we're sort of almost knee-jerk reacting from because something hasn't quite gone right? So we're just trying to move away from that, as you were saying earlier. And then to really tune in. And again, with the first one, if you don't know this one, then the first one's probably means you're not aligned. But with this one is what is your real passion or real reason behind setting the goal? So how do we know if a goal feels aligned? Well, you should have a sort of a quiet excitement or curiosity behind the goal. The idea of completing it should ideally make you feel expanded rather than setting a goal which makes you want to contract. So in other words, it's coming from your heart rather than from your mind or your ego. And this is one of the things we actually cover in our Tap to Fate course. So another important thing really here to focus on is that your brain focuses on what it hears most. It focuses on repetition. It doesn't recognize the difference between negative and positive. The mind doesn't necessarily believe what's true. It believes what it hears most. It believes what is repeated. So when you repeat in your mind what you don't want, your mind doesn't hear the negative, so it'll believe that to be true. So, for example, I don't want to be shy. The more your mind hears that, the more it's kind of thinking, I'm shy. So it reaffirms you are what you don't want to be. Another example, if your focus is on not being a smoker, your mind believes you are a smoker at an identity level. And as we go on to cover it in a moment, it's that identity level that will then work against you. So goals need to be aligned and they need to be set on the towards, not the away from position. Towards positive forward thinking. In other words, what do you want to achieve, not what do you want to step away from?
So just delving deeper into goals, how are we taught about goals? So we've all been taught in certain ways. We've been taught different techniques like vision boards, mind movies, affirmations, and they do have value because they are part of, taking us in the right direction, and they start normalizing the goal as well. So when we're focusing on it enough times, it is becoming normal. We're becoming sort of familiar with it. Have many of you heard of SMART goals? Before, SMART goals are like the specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Personally, I hate these. I hate the concept of SMART goals, and the reason is they work against the subconscious mind. They're a useful marker. They're used in many different areas, including it's what I was taught when I first did my life coaching, but I really were not fond of them because of what we're going to be talking about. So why do these have a limited or temporary effect? So there's quite a few reasons. One of them is we are often choosing goals with our minds and our egos, rather than our hearts. And that is because that's kind of what is generally, talked about in the mainstream. We get conditioned that way. So unless we actually sort of tune into it, what's coming from our mind, what's coming from our hearts, we will find ourselves often going with the mind. And one of the reasons for this is because, we're setting goals due to societal conditioning. Things like we must set goals on New Year's Day. That is something that we're picking up from society rather than when do we feel it, the right thing to do. Again, depending on what sort of social media accounts you might follow, they might be talking about setting goals based mainly on your mind, rather than your heart. So I suppose just be discerning about where you're hearing messages from, and just tune into, are they asking for mind goals or they're asking for heart-led, goals? And we often choose motivation and discipline to help achieve our goals. Again, this is sort of conditioning, and that's short-lasting. And this is one of the reasons why majority of people have sort of who've set New Year's resolutions, New Year's goals, by week 3 or 4 of January are sort of back to where they started, or have had, little effect. Um, and as Sebastian said earlier, it's not your fault. This is just the way we've been set up, and that is not been set up to win. The most important reason why the goals have limited effects is because they don't talk about who are we going to become when we achieve the goal. you know, and that is why alignment is so important, because you're not just trying to achieve your goal, you are trying to change who you are. When we do go for goals and when we have setbacks, when we fail, unfortunately, it can lead to disempowering emotions happening, such as frustration, despondency, self-judgment. And that is why when we do set goals, after sort of what we covered today, um, it's important to choose your goals carefully and when you go for it, because you're then less likely to fall into the cycle. But imagine if you knew why it all happened, why this sort of fallback kept happening. Imagine if you knew that your mind is not actually designed to help you achieve goals. Its actual focus is survival. It has one purpose, and that is just to keep you safe. So when you fail to achieve your goals, going by the sort of traditional routes, it's not lack of discipline or motivation. It's an identity and safety problem.
So, the first part of the secret is that to achieve a goal, subconsciously at least, part of you knows that when or if you achieve it, your life is going to be different and you will be a different person. Now, some teachers even say that it is more about who you need to become than it is to achieve the goal itself. Right. So, yeah, when we are stepping into a goal, when we choose a goal, there's part of us at least that knows that in order to get and to attain that goal, life will change. Right. The second part of the secret is that our natural inbuilt resistance, because the mind wants to keep you safe, and change in life or change in who you will be is something that is new and uncertain. So you will get a level of subconscious resistance to that. And this will play out in basically the patterns that show up. So it'll play out in thoughts, feelings, and actions. And you may, and all of these things mean that you may feel you have to effectively fight against them to keep moving forwards towards your goal. So this is where discipline and motivation fail. Because not only do discipline and motivation need to be constantly applied consciously, but applying them is actually fighting against the very resistance. And when you do that, the resistance gets stronger. So you have to fight it even more to the point where ultimately, usually the resistance wins out. Right, so because achieving a goal means change, which means a change in who you are and how you show up in the world, that's a change in your identity. So any change will create resistance because of that unfamiliarity. So and just for example, we've probably all had times in life where when things at work or in the family have changed, you will instantly, initially at least, feel a little bit uncomfortable with it, right? And that's your resistance showing up. So when your identity is changing, that is actually extra significant because, all change has resistance, but when your identity is changing, your subconscious mind and your nervous system are basically kind of trying to pull you back because they prefer predictability and familiarity over change and uncertainty, right? It makes it feel unsafe. So achieving a goal changes identity, and a new identity is change. Change is unfamiliar and seen as unsafe, so the mind resists it. Because we don't understand resistance, most people don't even recognize they're having resistance. Most people don't even recognize they're running the patterns as a basis of resistance, right? Because most people don't understand it. It's basically in a place where it's signaling to stop trying to achieve the goal. And this is why very often people experience limited progress or even end up returning to where they started. So, when we learn to expect that we will have resistance so that we can have awareness of it when it shows up, it doesn't faze us, and we can understand why it's there and how to respond to it, we can then start to do things differently, right? So resistance actually comes from self-protection. So this is basically us staying safe from, staying in our comfort zone, avoiding scenarios and feelings based on how we've interpreted past events and emotions in the past. An example of this might be setting up or growing your business. So how might that show up? Well, subconsciously at least, it's like, how will life change? How will life be different for the new successful version of me? How will people relate to the new successful version of me? Will I get disconnected? Will I lose connection, which is a natural human need? Will people start to expect more from me? Will I have new responsibilities? Will I actually fear losing it all? Will I judge myself for having not tried it earlier? There's a million and one different reasons why your subconscious might be sort of trying to help you avoid experiencing some of these thoughts and feelings that would hold us back. But remember, all of these are coming from your current level of beliefs based on our old conditioning and programming. And when you have stepped into the new identity and finally become that new identity, your level of beliefs will be different. So it's almost like we're judging a future self from a current level of fear. So another example might be, if you want to lose 20 pounds because you want to look better, right? Subconsciously, you might feel uncertain or unsafe about receiving unwanted attention. You might not consciously be aware of that, but subconsciously, you might be kind of thinking, I'm going to get a level of attention that now might make me feel unsafe, right? Or it might be that your different food choices may cause conflict with your family or friends that you socialize with, for example. So it's like, will I step into a new diet? Are people going to judge me for when we go out for dinner and I'm having a salad, whatever it is, right? So the thing to note here, though, is that resistance is inevitable. The important thing is it's how we respond to it that matters. And awareness is always the first step. When we are aware of resistance, we can respond to it differently. And instead of resisting it, we can accept it, embrace it, and soften it. So, how do we do this? Well, as we'll show you later, you can soften resistance by becoming more and more familiar with the future identity. The more your mind experiences that future version of yourself, it'll feel more comfortable with it. We can then take smaller steps towards the goal that feel less unsafe. And then the other thing is that when resistance comes up, recognize it for what it is and learn to accept it instead of fight it. Now, we're going to do an exercise at the end of this workshop. where we want to show you a way to make you A, familiar with that future version of yourself that's achieved the goal. So the more your subconscious mind visits that space, the more familiar it will be. And the repetition also makes your brain believe it to be true. Secondly, we will show you how to lower the barrier of resistance and feel safe stepping into and visiting that new reality with less or no resistance.
Okay. Does anybody if anyone has any questions, we'll just take a short pause. If anyone has any questions, then please put some in the chat, and we've got like a few minutes where we can address some of those, and then we'll just give a very kind of before we go into the tapping exercise, just like just a very, very short summary of what. So I'll just give you a moment or so. So, is this all making sense so far? We can just get a yeah. Mm. Okay, wonderful. So I mean, essentially, the key message is that when we set goals, it's about choosing the right goal and making sure that it's an aligned goal and towards goal and what we've sort of covered that way. And knowing that when you're going for a goal, it's not just about achieving the goal, it's about who you become when you achieve that goal. So that's the first thing. You're changing your identity. And this is something that is not really spoken about. It's just about, get this goal. But really you are changing who you are when you achieve a certain goal. And when it's a goal, for example, something tangible, like weight loss, for example, you are literally changing who you are, on the outside. But with the other things, you are changing, if it's a business, for example, you want to start, you're going from having the identity of someone who maybe hasn't started a business yet to someone who's a business owner. So if we just start, and that will help us sort of choose our goals as well. If we think about, does this goal align with the identity of who I want to become? Does that align? So your identity is changing. And then the second part is that once you do start changing when you move towards changing your identity, resistance is always going to come up because what you're going into is unfamiliar to the mind, which only wants to keep you safe and in the familiar. So once we know to expect resistance, then we know that we can look out for it. We can see how it shows up for us. We can practice keeping our body safe and taking lots of small steps so the resistance isn't so overwhelming. So that's just like a very brief summary of kind of what we've discussed, so far. If I just quickly look in so we've got, is this not the same principle followed to manifest? Yeah, I would say it is. It's still pretty much the same thing. With manifestation, you're sort of trying to bring something into your reality. And with achieving a goal, you're doing the same thing. You're bringing something, you're almost turning something from the non-physical into the physical. So it's kind of along the same principles. And if we sort of apply this principle to any form of change, whether it's goal setting, whether it's just some other form of change or manifesting, when we manifest something, we change the identity of who we are when we've manifested whatever that is. So
Yeah,
is there
one of the
anything you
one of
want to
the
add?
yeah, I was just going to say one of the key things behind why people fail to manifest most of the time is their belief or their ability to actually achieve the goal. Um, Most of the time, people are taught in numerous ways how to, what the rule set is. But what, the biggest challenge behind all of this is the identity piece that goes with it, which it often isn't taught that well. So, and people set too big a goals, or people are already in that space of, by the time we've learned about manifestation, we're already in that space of having set goals and failed, set goals and failed. We've got the mindset of I never achieve goals. So when we then step into trying to manifest, the frame of reference we've got that our brain has had on repetition and therefore believes is I can't make this work for me. I can't trust myself to follow through. Yeah. So this is why sort of big, and that adds to the resistance. I don't want to step into this because if I step into this, I'll only validate my fear that I'm not good enough.
So if there's any more questions, I know I think we're okay. So we are ready to go into. Ooh,
We've got a question from Masiki. Do you want to just jump off mute very quickly?
Yes, thank you. I don't know whether you're going to cover this in this next part of the workshop, but I was wondering whether, I mean, I really appreciate the way that you linking setting goals with identity, and fact that when you change, whether it is a behavior or a mindset or attitude, it changes your identity.
mm,
So would you then say that when you set a goal, you need to think about the person that you want to become first, and then from there you say, okay, so what are the goals that would get me to that identity, instead of, and I think it's probably what you were saying earlier on, that instead of saying I want to lose 5 kgs or 15 kgs, you set the identity of who you want to become. And then from there, you can then say, okay, I need to exercise and start by losing a kilo here and 2 kilos after 2 months or whatever it is.
Yes. So it's a bit like the way most people kind of think about a vision and then goals being the steps to achieve that vision. Yeah. So set smaller goals. So as you say, it's a bit like the analogy of reading a book. You might pick up a massive book and think I've got to read all of this book. And it's just like this feels so overwhelming. Whereas if you set the goal to read a couple of pages, you've read a couple of pages, you've got the frame of reference that you can just get going and read a couple of pages. And by the time you put the book down, you've probably read a chapter. Do you know what I mean? So it's by setting the smaller goals, not only are they more achievable, but by then achieving them, you're giving yourself a different kind of feedback. You're giving yourself positive feedback, which encourages you and helps you get maintain momentum and move forwards, rather than negative feedback, which just reaffirms the belief that you can't do it. I think another thing here that you've just helped us or helped me remember is that the notion that we are actually, in the same way that we're manifesting all the time, and a lot of the time we're sort of actually manifesting based on our limiting beliefs and other people's agendas. So we're manifesting what we don't want effectively. We're also changing all the time. Change is inevitable. Resistance is inevitable. The thing is, and this is obvious in that everyone on the screen today, you'll all be a different person to who you were when you were 17. You're a different person now to who you were a year ago. You're potentially even a different person to who you were a week ago. Every interaction, every thought we have changes who we are, even if that is simply to, by the default of um, avoiding what makes us feel uncomfortable because of our limiting beliefs and staying in our comfort zone, we reaffirm and strengthen those beliefs that we have, right? So people that are stuck in that place of mediocrity and not changing, well, they kind of are changing because day by day by day, they're deepening their beliefs that they're not good enough, deepening their beliefs they can't manifest, deepening their beliefs they come from poor family that can never achieve anything, right? So change is inevitable. What we can do is choose the direction of change, right? So the first step of that is setting your intention. Even if you do nothing else, setting intention is a bit like saying, right, I'm going to point the compass to the north and walk in that direction. Yeah. But the next thing is okay, I can design and choose the change I want to step into. And this is this is why most of us are here, right? Because this is personal development. This is a place we're all in. But of course, that is then if we simply just say this is who I want to be, we're stepping into something that's unfamiliar. We're stepping into something that feels unsafe, it's uncertain. So we get the resistance. Yeah, and so that's like this inner conflict that we have. I really want to be this, right? Consciously, but subconsciously, it's like, well, oh, I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm not sure that that's something I can handle. Jill, do you want to come off mute?
Hi. Uh, I I like what I'm hearing, and I want to also ask you a question about I tend to set my intention, but I'm also more of a perfectionist. And I know, and I don't know if you're going to address this later on or not, but I wanted to say that this is something that affects me. I'll set that intention. I have, start off really well. Let's just say I have the intention of exercising every day. And yet, when that day comes that I don't exercise, because of other things going on or whatever happens, well, I used to kind of fall apart. I kind of have gotten around that now, but the fact is, it just kind of devastates me. Okay, I didn't do it. I failed myself, and I just wanted to see what are your thoughts on that?
So perfection is just a pattern of avoidance, right? So we talked earlier about the self-protection side of things. So when we're in a space of perfection, it's like I don't want to start because if I do start and it's not perfect, I'll judge myself. So we kind of procrastinate to avoid falling into that trap. Um, the problem is though, and it's quite typical with perfectionists, is that by not starting, we then judge ourselves because we can't achieve perfection if we never start. So that then starts to reaffirm the fact that we can't make progress, we can't reach perfection. So it's more a matter of trying to understand really what's behind the perfection. Why do you feel that you need perfection? And it very often comes from, growing up or through school or whatever that might be, that if we presented something that someone's given us some uncomfortable feedback on, so now we feel like I don't want to produce anything in the world unless I believe it's perfect, because otherwise I'm going to get judged as not being perfect. The problem is that perfection isn't attainable because even if we get to a point where we think something's perfect, we'll always be looking for ways to improve it.
And that's good feedback. Thank you. I also realized too that I've had to realize, hey, wait a minute, I am not perfect. And there are times when things will happen, and then I go, okay, if I, somebody even told me the 80% rule one time, if you aim toward 80%, not 100%, and I started doing that, and yes, then it's easier to get back onto it again. But it's just that feeling of, hey, I failed myself. Why am I continuing?
Well, the other thing to remember here is who defines perfection in your
Yeah,
world? Yeah, you do. So
right.
you can redefine what perfection is. And actually, if perfection is, I've got started, perfect, doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So you have the freedom and the choice to do that. So give yourself permission.
And just another angle to come at is looking at the goal itself. And you said you wanted to exercise more. What is your why for wanting to exercise more? Is that why big enough? Because when our why is big enough, that will sort of collapse a lot of the resistance. So what is your why for wanting to exercise? And really looking at that, what is that? And then if you just look at the exercise part, is it that perhaps you've chosen a type of exercise that doesn't quite align with you, doesn't quite resonate with you? It's something that you should be doing because someone says you should, or because maybe you see other people doing it, so you think I should be doing that. So maybe looking at, if your why for exercising is big enough, great. Then what is the type of exercise I'm choosing to do? And sometimes you have to try different things. Sometimes it might be this isn't working. Maybe I have to try something else. So it's not failure, it's feedback. It could be that, say you want to exercise, you want to do like run 5K, for example. Then you do it, but then you realize I'm not feeling motivated to do it. I'm not really enjoying it. That's not failure. That's just maybe it doesn't suit your body and that you just need to find a different type of exercise that aligns more with you. So it's like looking at the goal as well and seeing whether it's the right goal for you in this instance. And yes, setting yourself up to win no matter what, and getting those dopamine hits going. So even just doing a tiny bit, even if you were just to do even 5 minutes of exercise, that's still a win, and celebrating that. Um, and sort of building from there. So there's quite a few things in there that one can look at. And but the first one is not to beat yourself up.
And I think that's a really good point about the aligned goals, because how many of us here have had parents that wanted us to go into a career or be something or do something that just wasn't us, and we kind of felt the pressure, right? And we get that from society, we get that from social media as well. In that, um, sometimes we end up setting goals that we just feel we should out of duty or responsibility or just because that's what everyone else seems to be doing. And those goals aren't necessarily aligned to who we are, what we want, what we truly want to achieve. And purely because of that, you're going to get a hell of a lot more resistance. So sometimes the resistance itself can be a bit of a message as to, does this, and this is why we talk about tune in. Does this align to my values? Is this a heartfelt thing, or is it purely from the mind? Am I setting up this business to do such and such because that's what dad did, or that's what other people seem to be successful at, and that's why I want to do it? Or are you setting up a business because that's what you're driven to in terms of service to the world or what you're passionate about generally? It's much, much harder to step into a business of something that doesn't light you up.
I hope that makes sense, Jill and everyone. So, and like I said, any more the questions, or feel free to put them in the chat, or we will. Otherwise, we'll go into an alpha tapping exercise. So, just a bit of a pre-frame, before that. And like I said, if anything else comes up, we will have time for shares at the very end. So, this is not the last chance. So with this alpha tapping exercise, as some of you already know, it's about being comfortable. You can turn your cameras off during the exercise if you like. Um, if you're sort of concerned about what emotions you might have, some people do sort of yawn a lot or cry sometimes. These are all normal release methods, but some people prefer to be behind a camera that's off. That's absolutely fine, no problem with us at all. And just have some water to hand as well, because when you're doing any form of energy work, it's always useful to stay as hydrated as you can. We're going to be going through an exercise where we will do 3 rounds of alpha tapping and then a short visualization. So I'm just going to invite you to think of a small or medium-sized goal that you would like to achieve. And we just take a moment to tune into it or just write it down. And as we've just spoken about now, and having a goal that's aligned, maybe tune into something that feels aligned to you. But we'll go for something that's small or medium at the moment. And if you don't have a goal, that's okay. Just think of something that you might like to change. Okay. And whilst you're just sort of tuning in, I'm just going to briefly explain what alpha tapping is, as some of you know what it is, some of you may not know what it is. So essentially, alpha tapping is a combination of breathing, 6 in, 6 out breathing, and tapping, emotional freedom techniques. We don't have time today to sort of really go into detail about how and why it works, but we've got plenty of information and posts about it on our Alpha Tapping Facebook group. For those of you who are not on the group, we will post a link to that sort of later on. The main thing to remember is that the alpha tapping, it drops you into the alpha brainwave state, which means your subconscious mind and nervous system help you feel safe and dissolve resistance. It's quite a quick and easy process. As mentioned, it combines tapping and the breathing. And the important thing here is not to sorry, not to worry too much if you don't get it perfect. You can't get this wrong. The intention is that we are setting the intention to get into the alpha brainwave state or the alpha state, and you can't get it wrong. We're going to be tapping. Sebastian's actually going to be doing the exercise, but I'll be tapping along as well. If you get lost at any point, just follow along with us. It's a very quick run through the points and how we do the breathing for those of you who may not be familiar with it. So there's 8 points in our body that we use. The first one is eyebrow point. So it's just on the inside of your eyebrow. Then we have side of the eye, which is on the sort of the bone, just on the outside of the eye. Sort of under the eye, on the cheekbone, under the nose, on the chin, and then the collarbone. So if you feel for the very end of your collarbone and just move in maybe 2 fingers along the bone, and it's just below that. And under the arm is just about a palm down from your armpit or just in line with the nipple for a man, and where a bra strap usually is for women. And then you have top of the head, which is just like the top part of our head. And when we tap, you can use 2 sides, but we just tend to use one side. And you just tap gently, not with too much force. You don't want to cause any damage or poke your eye out or anything like that. So just tap gently, whatever feels comfortable to you. And the 6 in, 6 out breathing is take a deep breath in through your nose for 6, and then out through your mouth for 6. So we go in with the 1 point, and then out with the next one, and then in with the next one, and then out. And we just keep going like this. And I'm just doing a very quick speeded up demonstration. So when we have covered 8 points like this is what we call 1 round. So what we will be doing to start the exercise is to be doing 3 rounds of that, and doing 3 rounds where you keep your eyes closed, perhaps, if you feel comfortable, or you can watch us, and just tuning in to sort of what you're doing and how you're feeling is usually enough to get us into that alpha state where we start to feel safe and where we start to feel that the resistance starts to go and we're more tuned into our inner world. So does that make sense for everybody? Everyone there? Yeah, wonderful. Okay. I will then hand you over to Sebastian. Oh, just a very quick question. Why do we breathe out through the mouth rather than the nose? Just breathing out through the mouth generally activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And if we breathe out slowly, we have more control. We can breathe out sort of slowly through our mouth. And that tends to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which takes us out of the fight or flight. There's a more relaxing one that works. I mean, it's not that you can't breathe out through your nose. It's just sort of best practice if we breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. So if you feel like we got to the end of a stage, just stay relaxed. We will explain every step as we go, and we will tell you when it's finished. So if you want to continue with your eyes closed and you're not sure what's happening, then just relax and breathe for a moment until we give the next instruction. So have a sip of water if you've got stuff to hand, and just start by taking a couple of gentle breaths to get nice and relaxed. So just start with a couple of breaths in for 6 and out for 6. In for 6 and out for 6. Now we're just going to start tapping on the first point. So breathe in on the eyebrow point. Side of the eye, breathe out. Under eye in. Under nose out. Chin in. Collarbone out. Underarm in. Top of the head out. Second round. Eyebrow point in. Side of the eye out. Under eye in. Under nose out. Chin in. Collarbone out. Underarm in. Top of the head out. Now the final round. Eyebrow point in. Side of the eye out. Under eye in. Under nose out. Chin in. Collarbone out. Underarm in. Top of the head out. And now just for the moment, just take a few gentle breaths, natural breathing. And just notice how you feel. Notice that calm, relaxed feeling, the quietness of the mind. Tune into that sense of safety, lack of resistance, muscles at ease. Breathing and just being feels natural. Now, what I'd like you to do is create an image of that future self of you that has achieved the goal that you've chosen. And I want you just to visualize them about an arm's reach in front of you. It doesn't matter if they're standing or sitting, whatever feels natural. Just notice, how do they look? What's their expression? What's their posture? How do they seem to you? Is there anyone else around? And if so, who is that? And if you feel any resistance towards being that future self, just remind yourself right now that you're safe. Now, I want you to imagine that you are, if they're standing, taking a step towards them, or if they're sitting, then standing up and turning around and sitting in the chair as if you are becoming them. Now, just tune in for a moment. How does that feel? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? And just remember now that you've achieved that goal. How does that feel? What feels different about this future you compared to the self you've just left? Now I want you to look back at the now past version of yourself. And take a moment to recognize everything that version of you has done and gone through to get you where you are right now. Take a moment to thank them for all they have done and send them gratitude and love in whichever way feels right to you. It might be words, it might be sending energy, it might be a beam of light. It might be something that feels so unusual for you, but just do it anyway. And now just tune in. How do you feel having achieved that goal? How do you feel having expanded from that person you see in front of you? From this point, you have a choice. Whatever feels natural, whatever feels safe. And you can stay with or as this new person, this new version of you that has achieved the goal for as long as you choose, for as long as it feels safe. Or if you'd rather come back to the version of you that started this exercise, that's okay. There's no right or wrong. It's whatever feels natural, whatever feels safe right now. The version of you who has achieved the goal is now known and familiar to your subconscious mind. Your nervous system is less uncertain about it. It feels safer. And there will be less resistance to becoming that version. And we invite you to visit that version whenever you like. Simply give yourself permission and make that version as familiar and as possible as you can. Now just take a few deep, natural, relaxing breaths in your own time. And just embrace whatever feelings you've experienced. If they're relaxed and exciting, I encourage you to celebrate. If they felt uncomfortable, have compassion. And when you're ready, just gently open your eyes and come back to the room. So what we would like you to remember is that every time you revisit that future self, your subconscious mind and your nervous system will become more and more familiar. Okay, it'll feel more certain. The more you repeat it, the more your mind will believe it. So we invite you to repeat this exercise as often as you can. What I would recommend, though, is that you keep the future self that you're aiming for consistent. The more you step into a different future self that's different every time, you're still stepping into something that's unfamiliar. So if you want to hone this and improve and change before you do this again, that's fine. But once you're there, try and remain consistent. And then obviously as you achieve and attain getting closer to that person, you can then take it to the next step. And who will you be from that place?
We'd love to know how you got on with the exercise, either in the chat, and we'll invite shares shortly. But in the meantime, if you want to stay up to date with any of these sorts of calls that we do, or find out any more about sort of safety, resistance, or alpha tapping, or updates of anything we're doing, then please feel free to join the Alpha Tapping Facebook group. If you're not already, because that's where all our updates, will be. Sebastian just puts the link. Mm.
So we're open to questions or shares. If anyone has anything they would like to I'm just going to scan through and make sure no one's waving their hand like mad. If you can use your digital hand, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable everyone to come off mute. There we go. So if you've got any shares, please just come off mute and or any questions.
I can share. It's so I recently had a goal of losing weight, and I did. First time in a long time, and I'd noticed that I think it helped this time the fact that I visualized my future self. But then I reached the goal, and then bit by bit the weight started creeping back on. And just from doing this session today, I realized I stopped concentrating and visualizing my future self and started thinking, oh, this is hard work, and do I want to eat like this and exercise like this for the rest of my life? Which is just crazy because I was actually loving the new exercise and eating regime, and it was also really easy for traveling. So yeah, so I'm going to get back on that and visualize my future self more often. So thanks.
And yeah, it's about making it more and more familiar. And in fact, as we were using the word future self, I was thinking if we can start thinking about it as it's our it's our now self, it's our aligned self, and when manifesting this, say, imagine the goal fulfilled, you've already got it and you're in that place already. And yeah, that is that version of you. You have access to her sort of whenever you want, really. So it's not really in the future, it's kind of just a slightly different version, of you that you can step into and adopt that identity. But yes, that's why we sort of tend to go backwards sometimes, once we've achieved a goal and we go back, because it's still not quite as familiar, or it still might not feel as safe, or because we've reached that too quickly. And as you've sort of mentioned, it's like about, things have to change when you get to a certain weight, whether it's the eating or whatever. And that it's about making that all more familiar as well. So, but no, great chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Shall we tell you what? I'm going to close the recording now. So if anyone wants to make some shares more comfortably or privately, then that's absolutely fine.